Hello, today I'm joined by my guest, Anthony Sutton from Cream HR. Anthony, how you doing?
I'm very well indeed. Thanks, David. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well today, Anthony. We were talking a little bit off camera before about estate agents, as I often do, but particularly I think one of our single biggest pain points as agents, and this is a commonality across the industry, is we're only as good as the sort of teams and people that we put together. And sometimes we hit it lucky, and we've got good teams that tend to run most of the time. And then when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work. And we tend to fall to pieces at that point because, and this is the interesting thing, we are a people industry. I mean, if you strip it back, estate agents are selling nothing other than the people that they've got in their premises. They're doing the selling. And the actual assets don't belong to us, but we're adding all that value. And the people that get to add that value are our staff, our teams, and we very often are guilty of not investing in it too much, so or enough, and we tend to then sort of fall down without that support. That's where you guys step in, right?
Yeah, you used a few words that are really powerful to me there. Everything in business is about people. It doesn't matter what you do, it's about people, but massively so in an industry like estate agency. Um, you're dealing with uh, a huge investment for most people. So, as an organization, when you're selling houses or renting properties, um, it's very much about the people who are working for you and the difference they're going to make to your organization. And you use the word investment. People are the biggest investment in any business. And strangely enough, they're often viewed as a cost rather than an investment. And if you can just shift your mindset slightly to think of them more as an investment than a cost, you'll actually start to get an awful lot more out of them because you'll take better care of them. But yeah, we are here to help estate agents in anything to do with their people.
What's interesting is that we touched briefly on it before, but when we all as bosses, as managers of people, we all are tasked with employing somebody at some point, and we do an interview process. A lot of that is received, so it's based on our own experiences at interviews. What questions have we been asked? um, you may even sort of go as far as googling what are good interview questions and how do you how do you get to the nub of it. I've seen people do it many different ways, and I've sat on both sides of an interview process over the years, and I'd like to think that we sort of call it right, but I can tell you there've been many times where I thought, wow, that candidate's fantastic. And then obviously you get into the relationship, and it's like any other relationship. The cracks start to appear, and you realize that it's not all rosy. But in theoretics, this person is the best person you've ever interviewed. So, and it staggers me that that is something that we use the word investment, but it's something we don't invest in at all. So it's not part of necessarily the ongoing training that we provide ourselves with in order to select the best candidates.
I find that subject alone, the recruitment piece of every business, absolutely fascinating. Um, we've all been there. Your experience is spot on. We generally go through what we've learned or observed over our lifetime in terms of how we interview. If you step back for a second, research suggests that about 86% of people lie on their CVs, and around 82% of people lie in interviews. I actually think the figure is probably higher. It depends how you define the word lie. Some of it would be perhaps withholding information rather than lying, but that whole audience is geared up to basically sell themselves to you as the recruiter. Whether you're the owner of the agency or whether you're a manager of an agency, if you're at the receiving end, you're dealing with someone who's fairly well prepared to not quite tell you the truth. So on the basis that your target audience isn't going to be completely truthful, and we're actually very untrained to interview, I find it fascinating that one of the most important activities that any business can undertake is recruiting good people. but barely any organization ever trains in how to interview candidates. There's a massive industry, the recruitment industry itself is enormous. A recruitment agency, and they are very valuable. So this is not me knocking a recruitment agency, but a recruitment agency's job is to sell people. They will prepare candidates, they will prepare CVs to read perfectly for that job you're looking to fill. That candidate will be briefed on what you're going to tell, what questions are going to be asked, and what to tell the agent about their experience. That often results in that experience of 3 months down the line, well, they're not quite what I thought they were going to be when I interviewed them, or they're not as good as I thought they were. And there is a method to follow, or methods to follow, where you can get far more closely a truthful response from candidates if you follow a structured process. It's a really big thing of ours. I love doing work with people on helping them to learn how to recruit better, because the results are immediate and much more long-standing. So that investment piece, if you recruit well and use a really structured process, you can get fantastic results and they'll stay with you. It's a fascinating area for me.
And so, but that's not it's not to say that if you get it wrong, as a lot of people do at interview process, that you can't manage a problem further down the line. There are things that you can step in, but we also tend to be traditionally really bad at calling time on that. So we allow situations to go on, and we'll just give it another 4 weeks. We'll review it then. We'll give it another couple of weeks and see. Well, let's wait till the end of the month and see what those figures look like. We all know what the gut feeling says, but we delay and delay and delay because, as we avoid confrontation wherever possible. It's just by nature of our profession as well. We kind of spend all day trying to split the difference between two negotiating parties. We end up forcing ourselves down the same line. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case either.
No, I mean, I find that there's so many elements that go into that. There's a bit of pride and ego. So I've recruited this person, so I want them to succeed because I've made that decision. There's definitely that bit of, or they're just going through a bit of a bad patch or a bit of bad luck, and I'll wait for a bit longer to see how they do. And that wanting to give people the opportunity, as you say, generally most of us are non-confrontational. We want to see the best in people, so you give them that extra bit of opportunity. It's important to make sure that you do manage performance and set expectations. So if we go back to the recruiting piece, where we start our work, we actually deconstruct the job to begin with. So it's a really important thing is to, sometimes if a business has lost David, I want to replace David. Well, there is only one David. So trying to replace isn't going to work. Whereas looking at what it is that goes in to make this person successful in our business is really valuable. And as part of that exercise, it actually means we have a series of outcomes that we put as measurable targets for this candidate. That becomes really useful when you've then recruited them, because you've got a ready-made performance management kit that says, if it's a sales role, we're going to measure you on weekly, monthly, quarterly targets against expectations, and we'll see how you're performing. We're going to look at referrals and recommendations, customer satisfaction, so how well we score in terms of what we've delivered. That gives you a ready-made way of assessing someone's performance. So it's really important that when you've recruited someone, you do have honest discussions with them about their performance. It may be actually they are good, but they're struggling for something that we haven't found out about yet. Maybe they have an issue around their confidence, or they, how they've been onboarded and they still don't get what the business does or what the differentiators are.
Or their role, very often it's as simple as they have a perception of what might tick your boxes in terms of, as a boss, what they need to do in order to get past your weekly or monthly meetings. But in essence, they might not be delivering on everything else at the coalface with the rest of the team as well. So there can be that disconnect between, and it just comes down to simple, this person does not know what their role entails and how they should be doing it.
Absolutely. And that bit, building a high performance culture, the first building block is clarity. And that job description gives the person clarity about their role. But that whole point of when someone starts a job, yeah, it's new. We've all done it. We've all been there. We're sort of wide-eyed working out what everything does and where it all fits together. The more an agency can provide real clarity for that person when they start, so that good onboarding process, ensuring they understand what's expected of them, understand how the organization works, so who you go to for HR queries, who you go to for financial queries, who you go to for holidays, is it your line manager, is this someone else? So that whole clarity then is the clarity of where the business is going. So if you're joining a business that's very strong on ethical grounds and they've got very clear messages that they stand by and values they stand by, making sure that that person knows that we will be measuring you in terms of your integrity and your honesty and things like that. So that clarity piece is the fundamental to getting the early stage right. And as you say, we often get that very, very wrong. It's go back to the investment piece again. As we've now recruited someone, investing some good time in their early stages to make sure they really understand what the expectations are, but also asking them. One of the interesting things we do, we've got a new recruit joining us in a couple of weeks, and I'm meeting him this afternoon ahead of joining, because part of what we do is spend some time with them before they join us. Yeah. And it's to get to know them a bit better. One of the main reasons is actually about how they like to learn. So learning is a constant process. And even at my old age, I love learning stuff all the time. I read loads, I absorb and seek information, but we learn differently. Some people like to learn by being thrown in at the deep end and literally, it's sink or swim time. Here's your target, there's your customer list, there's the property, there's the phone, get on with it. And some people absolutely thrive. They love it. They're the ones who, out in the wilderness, they'll go, right, I'm going to be going that way, and whether it works or not, I'm off. Some people really hate that. They do need to either read about the details and to learn from written words how the organization works. What do our contracts look like? What are our terms? How do we negotiate with clients? What do we do in terms of presenting properties?
So when you meet this gentleman this afternoon, how will you get to know a little bit more about how he likes to learn? So give us some tips.
I'm going to ask him, he's actually quite interesting because he didn't start a career in HR, but during the lockdown, he decided that he wanted to change careers. So he assessed and worked with some outside assessors to work out where some of his strengths may be. And he landed down there. So he's actually funded himself on some of his CIPD journey already. And one of the things I want to do is ask him where he's found it easiest for him. So what's he learned and how did he learn? Where he was successful, what was it about that bit that he found easier than another bit? And sometimes it will be the topic, and sometimes it'll be the way that the information was presented. So that's a very much a getting to know you session for me. So when he arrives with us, we will gear our onboarding for him around the way he wants to learn. So he's got every opportunity to do that, rather than us just saying, this is how we do it. It's our way or the highway sort of thing. There are, you adapt to that investment as much as we possibly can, because it doesn't make any difference to me. If he wants to be thrown at the deep end, we can do that. If he wants to watch and learn from me or my colleagues, he can do that. And if he wants to go away and do some academic work, learning, and we can test him, he can do that as well. So it's really important, and that sort of turns the tables to a certain extent on, it's not all about us as the employer. One of the biggest things, we all pretty much have to go to work to pay our bills. There's very few of us out there who don't have to do that. And on that basis, you want to try and find somewhere that you enjoy and where you feel valued and wanted, in terms of the experience and being with the employer. Now, that's a two-way street. It's just the same as you said when buying a house. You're the intermediary in a relationship to do with an investment, to do with normally at least two people buying the house as a couple, and then all of the other things that go into that, where the reasons they're buying it, whether it's for an investment or as a home. That relationship is just the same in employment. You're bringing someone that you want to fit in.
Completely that way, and I think that most estate agency owners, anybody that's been involved in negotiation, they will be well versed in the fact that sometimes you need to change your negotiation style to suit the circumstances. For argument's sake, you can afford to be a bit more bullish at the beginning when there's four people after that house, because
Yeah.
everybody knows they're one of four people, they're bidding for it. Then once you select a winner, they sort of feel that, well, actually, the other three have now been let down. They've got a fairly good chance of being the only horse in the race. And they become a little bit more bullish. And at various different stages in a transaction, it can become more emotional. So you may need to sort of get off your sales box and actually
Yeah.
become a bit more of a therapist and take some time to understand all the sort of issues that they're struggling with as a couple
Mhm.
in moving to that house or getting that transaction done. So in the day to day of our jobs, we're particularly good at changing track when we need to. But I bet, well, in fact, I know we are crap at doing that when it comes to managing our own teams and our own staff. We don't think about changing our behavior or doing things differently. We just, and I don't know why it is, but we tend to just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and it's that we're under a great deal of pressure. So that's part of it. We're all under pressure to perform, whatever that is. So that sometimes is where we don't adapt our style because we're emotional about a situation. So whether it's to do with that employee or not, we're still very much wrapped up in something else which carries over. That's the ability to adapt is really, really important because obviously how you treat that investment is so important. The rinse and repeat is one of the most interesting lines because if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expect
Get the
different
same
results, yeah, well, you just need to take a look in the mirror and go, there's one consistent issue here. It's not, it's actually you. So a big part of this is also being honest with yourself as a human being. I think estate agents they're very entrepreneurial. It's a business about flair and passion, enthusiasm, whatever you're doing, that style that you bring to the marketplace and to your customers. And that's fantastic. It's a really, really powerful thing. And it's just good to have a look and say, well, when I'm dealing with people, I actually want to make this work. This is a massive investment. And the more you go through the repeating mistakes, the more likely you are to get the same results. But if you can look in the mirror and say, actually, I need to do a few things differently here. I need to start learning. And that's partly where we come in as well, is that sort of having a sounding board as a coach and an advisor who can help say, well, there are some different ways to do this. Because when you're dealing with people, there is no one magic wand. We are all different. Without quoting Monty Python, we're all individuals. And
I'm
we are.
not.
Exactly.
Well, look, the title of this webinar is "It's the People, Stupid." But in the notes that you sent over, and we always ask a few questions before, just as a sort of get to know you. You've referenced something that I'd never heard about before, but I think that lots of people would be interested in, and that is the law of crappy people. Tell us what it's all about.
The law of crappy people is a really simple mechanism. So it was coined by a very famous tech entrepreneur called Ben Horowitz, who is quite a legend and has written books and one of the early founders of the internet as we know it. And his mantra was basically all about, if you start a business and everyone's at level A, and that's nothing to do with academics or anything, it's just the best people to do their job. The moment you recruit someone who's level B, and if that person manages to stay in your business, which can be quite difficult for someone who's under pressure of being with good performers, as you grow, and if you give them hiring authority, the first thing they will do is recruit level C's, D's, E's, and F's.
Right.
So all of a sudden, you built this business that you think's fantastic and it's level A, but when someone has a good look in, actually you've got a whole team over here that's level F. and what you thought the business was worth is nothing like what it was worth, because someone doing due diligence will suddenly find you out. And they use that mechanism to make sure they use it as a recruitment tool in simple terms. So they never recruited below a set level, and they had a process and a scoring system, which was fabulous. And we were very lucky that we worked with them for a few years in 2 of their organizations in the UK. And they came to us, which was even better, because these were sort of legends of the Silicon Valley world at the time. And we were working with Yahoo, managing all of their European recruitment at the time. And they were struggling in the UK, and they said, we need someone to help. And we've heard about you, and you do some really good work. And we happen to be doing exactly what they did anyway, independently, and we worked really successfully. The reason for mentioning it is actually where it comes down to value. They were clearly money-driven entrepreneurs in the tech world, but in the early 2000s, they had a business called Opsware. And previously had a business called LoudCloud. They were doing cloud computing in the 1990s, but Opsware as a business only existed for about 3.5 years. They employed about 500 people worldwide, so it was no massive business. And it was bought by Hewlett Packard for $1.6 billion. Yeah. And it was massively around the technology that had been built, but being built by these people who were just shoulders above the quality of anyone else could recruit, because they were so rigorous in getting it right. So it's a really wonderful
makes sense what you say, because by nature we don't want to recruit anybody that might be a threat to us. So very often, if you're tasked with recruitment, then you're not going to select somebody who is as good as you or better, because that instantly makes you redundant from day one. And that's a mistake, really. So you do get this filtering down. And I remember in the voluntary sector, I've been given this piece of advice twice by people. So I for argument's sake, became the chair of a housing association, and the outgoing chair always has to sort of give you his 2 pence worth. And the advice was, make sure you find your replacement first. That's what you should do. And in many senses, that's great advice. I've been given that advice in 2 bits of this voluntary sector, and it works very well. And it's good to know who the next generation is. And once you've accepted that, you're not really in competition. You start to see their ideas as really being valid on the same level as yours. But when it comes to business, we never do that properly. We don't go and find somebody who will replace us, because we have that nagging worry that one day there'll be a world where people won't say, "Where's David?"
That was a fabulous point. And I can remember firsthand a personal experience of my own, where I was recruiting and I had an instinctive, instant dislike for this person. And it's funny, it's a bit like, I'm sure you've come across the chimp paradox. And I had this chimp on my shoulder, which was saying, no, just don't recruit this guy's, no, far too good, better than you. And then this light bulb moment that went, this person is going to make my life so much easier, because actually you should always be looking to recruit people who are better than you, because it doesn't make you redundant. It allows you to go on to do other things, whatever they are. So if it's, if you're running an estate agent's business, so say I've got 3 offices and I've got a manager in each, if you're ambitious to grow, those managers should be looking for people who can come in to take their roles. They can start working on expanding the business into other areas, or looking at the biggest development plans for the organization. So rather than being a threat, which is where that comes from, we're threatened by someone who might be better than us, embracing that person on the basis that they're going to actually help make us perform far, far better, which is better for all of us, actually frees us up. But it is very hard to overcome that sort of instinct. And instinct's important. It plays a really big part. There's a reason why we might be walking down a road at night and see something that just triggers an uncomfortable feeling. That's not necessarily a paranoia. It's something in our very primordial brains that's there for a reason, that says, this doesn't feel safe to me, get out. And that's the same sort of instinct when you meet someone. the crossover there of whether you're going to get on with someone. That's also part of the challenge. One of the things within any entrepreneurial business is managing egos and managing personalities, which can be very challenging. But
Yeah.
again, if you're recruiting strong people as the manager, then your role starts to become, how do I get the best out of these competing egos and make them really work together as a team? And if you look at high performing teams, so sports, obviously one of the things you can always go straight into. If you look at the top performing teams, they've got tons of egos, all the way, including the manager in many of them. But they are brilliant at being able to work on keeping everyone happy on the basis that we're actually on a mission.
And it's endemic, isn't it, really, with high performance culture, high performance sectors, whatever it is that you're looking at, whether that be in sports, or we like to refer to sort of the elite performers in sort of UK estate agency. We're not very good at owning our success. So we like to sort of, we're a little bit British about it. But if you look at Australia or America, the way that they laud their high performance culture over there in terms of what the agents do there, it's starting to seep over here, but that is all around ego, because you need to believe that you are, you are the Tiger Woods of your particular niche, or whatever it is. You need to be at the top of your game.
And recognition's a really important part of building that culture. We have a sort of 4 cornerstones to build a high performance culture. Clarity, we touched on. Strengths is another one. So that's using people to the best of their abilities. So making sure they have the opportunity to do what they're really good at as much as possible, because they'll do it well. Praise is a really big part of that recognition piece. You're absolutely right. That sort of British approach to, well, we want to keep it low key. I think we're in a different time. I think we have evolved, so there is far more appreciation and recognition. And whilst there's always a culture that we like to knock people off their perch when they've done well, I don't think that's ever going to go away. That's universal as well. That's not just a British thing. There's always people who do like to do that. But I think the recognition piece of people doing a good job, and that's not just people who are at the front edge as well. So one of the big things about the team is, great administrators are really good at helping make the team work. So if you've got someone who's fabulous at organizing your operation and making the team perform better, they need recognition too. And I think that's one of the things a great team does, is make sure that we recognize that we're all part of this and we're in it together and we support one another. A tip on recognition and praise, though, people, goes back to what I'll be talking about this afternoon with my new recruits, is not everyone likes to receive praise in the same way. So some people really dislike public praise. And if they do dislike public praise, it can be massively demotivational for someone if you then constantly praise them in public. So that's about making sure you do know your people and you have a chat to them. And you can say, look, when you've done well in the past, and I want to recognize your success, I want to reward you and give, my plan was to do this, is that okay? Or would you rather me do it in a different way? Because you can actually really, if someone's very shy, even though they're a good performer, doesn't want that public recognition, you can actually do quite a lot of damage to their motivation. So do be a bit careful. But I massively, you need to celebrate success and celebrate everyone who contributes to that success, and it will always be people.
It's a fascinating discussion, and I think you and I could probably talk for hours, but to save everybody the pain of having to listen to you and me ruminate for hours, what I'd like to just tackle one last issue with you, and then perhaps we'll talk about how agents could work with you and how you could help them. But we spoke before we got started on this interview, and one of the things that you mentioned is fascinating to me, that a marketplace, when you're recruiting, generally speaking, is full of people who are, well, oftentimes you'll throw away 90% of the CVs that you're dealing with, because they're not the right people for the job. And it's a different law of crappy people, and it's a different type of crappy people. But very often the job marketplace can be flooded with people that have got issues that are unresolved at their current workplace that make them difficult to work with, or perhaps not the right member of staff there, and wouldn't necessarily translate well into your business either.
Mm,
So by nature, those people who are high performers, who are the best at their jobs, very rarely just milling around the marketplace
mm.
looking for new challenges. Yes, there are those out there, but they're a rare creature in the wild, really. So, how do you go about it without sort of falling into that trap?
I think it's a really interesting, and recruitment is a massive challenge for everyone. Always is. It's time consuming. It's one of those things you need to get right. You're absolutely right. In my opinion, if you're a top performer, there's rarely a reason that you should be looking for a role. There are occasions, of course. So, I've had an argument with my boss, my commission scheme's been changed, I got recognition that I didn't want. But generally, the good people will stay put because they should be being well looked after. So one of the things, well, there's two things to cover in some ways. So one of the things we would do, and we can help organizations with, is deconstructing that role. You will find that if you're prepared to give people the opportunity to learn your business, so learn being an estate agent and learn about buying and selling houses and renting houses, then there are lots of the attributes that go into being a good estate agent that you can find in other industries, and people would like to work in estate agency. There are lots of transferable areas. So by deconstructing the role, and I'll give you a strange parallel. We've worked in fine art in Mayfair before, and with a business that was looking for very commercial salespeople, and fine art and commercial sales doesn't necessarily map very well. And we deconstructed the role, and actually estate agents were a really good potential area to look for, because
Yep.
the purchase is very similar. It's a very expensive purchase. It's very emotional. It's an investment. It's often two people at least involved in the process. So by doing that, you can actually open your opportunity. So by looking for different people. And one thing I'd actually touch on as well, a lot of organizations use technology as the filter for candidates. And it's really useful if you've got volumes of people, but it almost universally misses the best people, because you're looking for average all the time. You're looking against
Yeah.
qualifications,
Commonality.
years of experience, always, because that's what it's trying to filter out, whereas some of the talent doesn't fall within those parameters. So actually being a human being in that process to look through CVs can be really valuable. The other part of that, in terms of finding or how to make sure you don't accidentally recruit a problem, I'll happily give this as a tip for everyone to use. The approach to interviewing we use is very structured. It doesn't mean it's boring, because it gives you freedom to go around, but we always ask people a question along the lines of, so if I'd worked for you, David, and I was being interviewed, you'd say, Anthony, I'd like you to give me the name of your boss at that organization and what their job title is. And in a face-to-face interview, we will write that down in front of the candidate, so they can see I'm writing David Mintz down, and he was the managing director of. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, and we will ask, when I call David and ask him to tell me about how well you fitted in with our team and what really you contributed, what's he going to tell me? And there's a really important piece in this, is it's when I phone. British people, in the same way we don't celebrate success, tend to be more reserved about asking very direct questions. So it's a very American style of approach. But the idea of saying when I call is that the person sitting opposite you immediately thinks he's going to make that phone call. If
Yeah.
you said, if I call, I've got my get out clause there, because he might make the call, but he's not really going to. When I'm working with clients on this, I absolutely stress, I will say to candidates, be aware that if you are successful, we make those phone calls. So we do need you to answer these questions. And people try and wriggle out of it in all sorts of ways. I've had people say, oh, you can't phone them, they're dead, anything. But there's always someone that you can relate to in the organization.
It's very interesting, because I've my style with my previous business partner slightly sort of differed. And I would say, okay, well, let's call the previous boss. And he would say to me, oh, you're not going to get anything out of the previous boss, because all you'll get is perhaps a glowing reference if they want to get rid of this person. If they've got difficult relationship problems, then they're not necessarily going to go into detail with you. So in our industry, it's the equivalent of giving a bad tenant a good reference to their next landlord,
Mm.
because you want to offload that problem elsewhere. So it's a fascinating area of discussion.
It's an interesting area. I mean, there is quite a lot of law around references. So some people are quite, you can tell the truth in a reference. That's basically the legal premise. As long as you're telling the truth, it's fine. I totally get that point on the basis that, I'll say something good to get rid of someone. We actually use a very structured approach to the reference. So we have a series of very important questions which we go through. So we don't tend to just follow that standard. Occasionally, of course, you'll get a pat on the head from someone who just wants you to go away, but genuinely good people, their boss will give them a good reference and genuinely follow the process. We spend 5 or 10 minutes on the call, if we're doing this for a client, on each reference, going through a series of questions to make sure we get that back. The other option of that is, of course, you don't have to ask the boss. You can pick members of the team. So it's also other people. You have freedom to say, actually, I'd like to ask you about. Now, of course, I might pick a friend or whatever, but it's you're trying. The technique is to try and make sure the person who you're interviewing realizes, I want to find out the truth about you. And therefore, you need to answer as truthfully as you can, and go right back to what we said about 80% of people lying in interviews. It forces someone to try and give us as honest an answer as possible.
I'm determined you and I are going to do a podcast purely on sociopaths and how to spot them, because since we spoke about that before we came on air, and I was thinking about it, that actually when you're dealing with clients, very often you'll come across one that will say just the right things. Oh, you're just all the other agents, they never understood me. They never got me. They couldn't work with me. And they went through a whole list of reasons why you're the best thing since sliced bread. And that should send the alarm bells ringing in your head. Very often we walk away going, oh yeah, I got that one.
Yes,
But you're saving
absolutely.
a problem for later. So I'm determined we'll get to the nub of that. But Anthony, just perhaps tell people and I'm sure numerous people have watched this and understood that people, and
Mm.
and you know what you're doing when it comes to the familiar sort of problems that most estate agency owners will be looking to tackle within their workforce. How best can they work with you? How does it work? Is there a perfect client that you're looking for? Can they call you when they're already in trouble, or do you want to be on that train from the minute it's left the station? Or will you it's a good question.
Yeah, we're there at any stage. So we want, and our model is strange in the fact that we always try and fit around our clients. We won't go to market and say, this is what we do, fit in us.
Yeah.
We want to understand from any of our clients what they're looking to achieve and what the issues may be. So in terms of ideal client, it's someone who understands and accepts that the people in the business are the most important part, and getting that right is important. So having someone who maybe it's begrudgingly has reached that conclusion or genuinely believes it, but then knows that actually my role is to run this business and to be successful. And I'm not brilliant at necessarily the day-to-day management of people or the development of them or the recruitment of them. And we can come in at all of those stages or any of them. So we can be end-to-end support with anything that people want to do. So in simple terms, we've worked with a number of businesses. We generally work with businesses from about 15 to 500 people. We do have a few bigger clients, but generally we're in that smaller community. So lots of us, commercial estate agents are perfect size for us. Very entrepreneurial businesses, so looking at results-driven organizations. And it's helping them with that day-to-day management. Can someone call us when they've already got an issue? Yes, absolutely. And we've worked with a number of agents in the past, and sometimes it has been on the basis that I've got a situation I need your help with. And we will do our best. It's hard. Sometimes we can't get a rabbit out of a hat, but we'll do our damnedest to do that. And at the very best, we'll try and minimize the risk you've got if you're already in a position that's too far down the line.
The reason I asked that question is that I know that, it's a bit like having insurance. None of us would get in a car without having it. So, because we know what could happen. But until it happens to you, you never fully accept that you're one of those people. And I think the most most estate agency owners, but particularly business owners, small, medium enterprises, they always take the view that we're going to generally be okay with this until they hit a problem that they can't get past. And it's then when they've got that pain point that they pick up the phone to an expert like you. So it can be the trigger very often for people taking this more seriously and then working it into the framework of what they do on an everyday basis.
Massively, and we're not an insurance business. I know that our market is populated by lots of insurance businesses who will provide you with this indemnity if you follow our advice. The advice is that for an insurance company, obviously, it's basically we're going to protect ourselves and make sure you don't get a claim. So our business is genuine insurance, and we're insured professionally to make sure we give our advice correctly for a lot of money. But you're absolutely right. It's the fact that we all take that view, and it's in life we will take that view of we'll be okay. And unfortunately, employment is a very expensive area. The reason why businesses look at people as a cost is they're expensive. They're often one of the biggest parts of your bottom line cost. You know, your premises and your people will be the biggest numbers in most businesses. So you are seen as a cost. And therefore that sort of mindset of, well, I don't want to do anything else and we'll be all right. Employment litigation is such a massive, massive area now. And because a business is insured, an employee in a desperate situation will definitely come after you because they know you have money through your insurers. And unfortunately, the world is full of a lot of that sort of activity. But similarly, it's easy to make a well-intentioned mistake, which could cost you a lot of money if you simply got one thing wrong and an ex-employee decides that actually I don't like the look of this, or they've got a friend who's an HR specialist or a legal professional, and all of a sudden you get a claim through ACAS, and they are phenomenally expensive to defend. It's not necessarily the cost of losing at tribunal that would be the biggest cost. It's the cost of the advice you need to receive to help you through that process, because it's a court and you need to go through the process properly with legal professionals. And it's the cost of your time. A claim that you're dealing with in a business could take hundreds of hours of your time.
And generally speaking, I mean, it might just be the way that we perceive these things, but the support for the actual employee seems to be a lot more available, a lot more cheaply than it is for the actual employer.
Well, there's a whole section of no-win, no-fee solicitors. They are out there in all areas of personal injury and employment. And if someone takes a view, the employee will, of course, present their side of what happened. And if a solicitor decides, right, I'll take this on for you, they aren't paying anything because they're only paying on results. So, yeah, I think there's always that feeling as a business owner, and being one myself, you feel that the dice are heavily loaded against you. The fundamental way of protecting yourself is to make sure what you've done is legally correct. And then whether someone takes you on or not, you have a defendable position to take, and at least you're in that, you have that strength of knowledge. But it is a minefield. I think it shouldn't deter people from recruiting and growing and want to embrace the fact that people are going to be the engine of your growth, but making sure you do have good advice and support available on tap. And we work in lots of different ways. We do work on a retained basis, which basically means we are a business's outsourced HR team and legal team and employment, and they don't need to pay the cost of having an HR person internally, or the lawyers that go with that as well. We also work on an hourly basis, like another professional services businesses do, and charge as and when we need it, or we work on projects. But having the support that you need to guide you through those difficult times is really vital. I think we saw some research a week or so ago which said 42% of SME owners in the UK, and that's most estate agents, their most stress comes from people. 42% of owners say the biggest stress they have is managing people. Our role is to help take a lot of that stress away by the owner and the manager knowing that whatever we're dealing with, it's being dealt with, and it's being dealt with positively and proactively to get to the result that we all want, whatever that may be. And that takes a massive load off people's shoulders, because they can close at the end of the day, go home and enjoy relaxing and enjoy their life, whatever that involves, without as much worry about what's going to happen if, because it's being dealt with.
Well, I highly recommend any estate agency owners out there watching this to get in touch with Anthony, because just from a sort of 20-minute chat I had with you at the beginning, fascinating in terms of where it could go. And it feeds into so many things that we're all concerned about, which is, creating businesses with a decent culture behind it, that have values. Do you know what your core values are? Are you actually able to transmit those clearly to the people that are working for you? There's so much that goes into it. And I'm almost certain we're going to be talking again, because I've got plans for you, sir. Let me tell you, a fascinating man, a great business. All your details are on kerfuffle.com. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much, David. I've really enjoyed it. We'd love to help the estate agent community, and we're delighted to be part of Kerfuffle.
Fantastic. Thank you.